Well, as we've been talking about, it has been a week of rapidly changing headlines on Detroit's future. There's been a judge's ruling, and there's been some yelling. There's officially a severe financial emergency in Detroit. That's not a shock, but saving Detroit from financial collapse is getting messier.
You all should be ashamed. Because if you read this decree, you know what it does to the people. We do not support a shadow council. We voted for 9 votes. Love them or leave them, but we did not vote for this committee to go forward.
Angry Detroiters blasted State Treasurer Andy Dillon and the rest of the Financial Review team at their public meeting this week, railing against Governor Snyder's proposed consent agreement, which prevents an emergency manager from running Detroit but limits elected officials' power. Now the Detroit mayor and several city council members are countering with their own proposed consent agreement. So where does this leave the review board? Well, they have a March 26 deadline to either recommend an emergency manager or accept a consent agreement.
I do believe that there is general recognition that we are in a financial emergency.
But hang on, a judge ruled this week this board can't approve anything until they show up in court next week for a hearing, since the board is accused of breaking the law by meeting in private. Add to that this week Moody's downgraded the city's credit rating even further. Time is running out, or really, the cash is. Detroit reportedly could be out of money within the next 60 days. The governor is capitalizing on that point. Even though he spent the week on a trade mission in Europe, he launched DetroitCan'tWait.com, aiming to explain the problems and plans to hold town hall meetings in Detroit when he gets back. Are these conversations a little too late? Should they have been done weeks ago?
Well, perhaps. But we want the city leadership to really take the initiative to presenting a document, to working with the state and getting to an outcome. We don't want to get in front of the city.
And joining us now to hash out what is going to happen next is former Detroit City Councilwoman Sheila Cockrel and State Senator from the city of Detroit, Coleman Young, Jr. Thanks so much for joining us today on MiWeek. All right, so Senator, I'm going to start with you. You saw the group of Detroiters who were protesting at the meeting earlier this week. Do you believe that that's how the majority of Detroiters feel about this proposed consent agreement?
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say thank you for allowing me to be on MiWeek. I'm official now in the big leagues now. Thank you so much.
Sitting at the table.
It's an honor for me to be
now
here.
He's in the big leagues.
Now in the big leagues, finally. I just want to say, yeah, I think that's a lot of majority of Detroiters feel. They feel this is a usurpation of their constitutional rights. They feel this legislation is unconstitutional and illegal, and they just don't understand why this is being done. And quite frankly, I have a lot of constituents in my district who don't understand why, when we're talking about reforming the city of Detroit, are we always talking about fiscal austerity? When are we going to start talking about the real root meat of the problem in terms of state policies? Whether it be reforming the auto insurance code, whether it be jobs, whether it be investment, whether it be community benefits agreements. So a lot of these projects that are happening actually have jobs that are created where Detroiters can have access to them. I think that's the major problem we're having in the city of Detroit right now. Unless we have jobs and economic development, unless we have investment and residential inclusion, it's only a plan for gentrification. Period.
So you're okay, though, then with the idea of us just overspending our budgets, that we don't have to live within our means?
Well, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, here's the thing. There are reforms that we can do. I don't know what the time clock, Lex, says. There are things we can do.
Well, we're going to run out of money in 3 weeks.
You go to Aviva. There's one things that you could do. You could also do things in terms of employee misclassification. That's something you could do. You could also go in terms of collecting the revenue that's out there. I think that's $155 million.
But Senator, it's 3 weeks. You can't do any of those things in 3 weeks. Sheila,
yes.
I mean, you're dealing with sort of this pushback, this resistance. You more or less support the governor's approach because we have no choice.
Well, yeah, and first of all, I was on city council for 16 years. This financial crisis has been looming for all of those 16 years, and in my opinion, actually goes back to the 1940s. When Jerry Kavanaugh became mayor, he had a deficit. If you want to spread blame, which I personally think is a silly exercise, there's enough to go around to administration after administration, everybody kicking the financial can down the road. Solutions now require that we look at a structure where there is external accountability for financial decision making. It works in cities. It's happened before across the country. Well, this is not time for Detroit exceptionalism. We're another big city with a huge financial problem. We need to go to the script that's worked for Cleveland, for Washington, D.C., for New York City, and follow that to get out of the hole.
But I think some of the frustration is, as you just said, that this has been looming for the 16 years that you were on council. I mean, when is there finally going to be a date where it's like this has to be done? It feels like we're talking about Monday, but then there could be another couple of weeks. weeks for time. When is enough enough?
Well, here's the thing. You could sell off all the assets of the city of Detroit. It's still not balance the budget. I mean, if the mayor would, this is just what I think. Politically, if he goes through with this, from what I'm hearing, he's signing his political death warrant. Politically.
Okay, this is
then on top of that, the fiscal side of it. If he actually went along and did everything that you wanted to do, did everything you wanted to do, he still wouldn't be able to balance the budget. So on top of being politically, wrong.
All right, well, jump in. No, hang on, Stephen. Jump in. You said that's not true. Go.
Well, it's not true. I mean, certainly you could structure the city government so that it didn't spend more money than it takes in. But you said something earlier that I wanted to ask Sheila about, actually. You said that you think that most Detroiters see this as some sort of usurpation and are opposed to it.
Absolutely.
I think, and I live in the city just like you do,
Absolutely.
I think most Detroiters are tired of living in the dark, living without police, waiting for EMS and buses that don't come. Sheila, what's your sense of what Detroiters want?
It is absolutely unscientific, but I'm out here now as a civilian.
You were at the meeting on Wednesday. We saw you there. Yeah.
People stop me all the time and say, well, what do you think? You were on council. The sentiment I get mirrors in what Stephen has said. And here's the thing, we start talking about rights. There's a constitutional right in the United States to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When is the right to life of a 12-year-old child who is playing basketball in front of their house, they lose their life? When does that come first? What we have to do is do the financial fixing and the structural fix to how services are delivered. But that needs to start with government. But one thing you are right about, none of these structures account for rebuilding an economy.
Exactly. How are you going to do without jobs?
No, but in order to do that, you've got to get the first house in order.
But Sheila, that's the third plank of the governor's plan. The governor recognizes that you can't simply just come in here, slash the spending, do all the other things you need to do to wipe out the deficit. He is also insisting on a plan that puts the city on a better financial path.
What kind of path? What kind of jobs plan does the governor have for the city of Detroit? I must have missed that. Maybe I was in the bathroom
Senator,
when you were talking about
jobs
that.
Plan?
Where?
What kind of jobs plan?
What kind of economic plan does he have? The only plan that the governor has in the city of Detroit is for contractors to come in and make money.
Well, hang on. Let's step back. Let's step back 1 second, Senator. Let's step back.
This is my week, not let it rip.
This is my week unplugged. Okay, hang on, Senator. Hang on. So let's step back. So we're arguing about this at the table right now. People at home are wondering, how do we know if, in fact, there is some kind of consent agreement? How do we know that it is going to work? How do we know that then it will cut down on the shootings of 12-year-olds? How do we know?
Exactly.
Well, you don't. I mean, but you have to start somewhere. We know what's happening now isn't working and hasn't worked for a very long time. Many public servants, and there are fabulous people working for the city of Detroit, have tried to make things work. The government has to be restructured. We have to get down to core service, which is what? Public safety.
Who is backing the mayor right now? Who is working with him?
You know, I think that's one of the problems, is that the mayor is isolated politically and in terms of popular support.
Isolated himself.
He's isolated himself. I mean, he's got Kirk Lewis and Chris Brown, the two closest executives to him down there, and there really isn't a whole lot else. The people that he used to take advice from in the business community can't get to him. The governor obviously doesn't have a great relationship with him anymore, if they ever did. Or the council. So I think one of the problems is that this mayor is not getting great advice about
Right, but I do think right now, that with what Treasurer Dillon said about this creative approach, there's a set of conversations going on right now that, and the reason I think they're serious is nobody's floating any draft documents for folks to look at.
Right.
There's no leaks. That's an important development, and that's going to put all three parties, the governor, the mayor, and the council, are in my opinion, serious negotiations with, I believe, all parties trying to get this done before the end of the weekend.
Coleman, you're shaking your head. You just keep shaking your head.
I just think the mayor and the council could put together a plan that would be the equivalent of a unicorn flying over a rainbow and walking down the yellow brick road. It's not going to be enough. I think they want to take the state. I think the state wants to take the city over. I think you might as well just put an entire fire sale for the assets.
The assets. All the assets.
What do you think?
Water department. You don't think that if you privatize the water department, that whoever would be in charge of the water part, would immediately
we can't make money off of it
major
now.
player.
Okay, hang on, Nolan.
Privatize it. That's the purpose of privatization, for it
Nolan,
to make money.
Go ahead, Nolan.
If it makes money, wouldn't that be good for Detroit if Detroit
Now,
owns
if the
the
now, if
assets?
the
All
water
right, well, hang on. Nolan's got the last question here.
Making decisions about it.
Can anybody quantify what happens when the money runs out?
There'll be, in my opinion, if the money runs out, there will be payless paydays, and eventually this will force everybody's hand. Frankly, what's as important as what's going on now, we've had a second downgrade. The second rating agencies downgraded the city's debt. There's only one left. That's a serious evaluation of what's going on in the city, and it's not good news.
Okay, Sheila Cockrel.
That the rest of the area is the contagion, the bond hit that will go for the rest of the region.
Yeah. All right, and then we'll continue to talk about this. Sheila Cockrel, State Senator Coleman Young II, thanks so much for joining us for a very lively discussion. Got a little hot in here for a moment. I had to fan myself off. So we're not going to throw chairs tonight. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm going to bring it back to just Stephen and Nolan here for a minute and talk about how this will affect the state. When we're talking about the bond ratings and how this makes Michigan look as a whole, because you got to believe that people in Grand Rapids are watching this, people up north are watching this and saying, how is this going to affect where I'm living in the state of Michigan? This isn't just a Detroit problem.
Well, it's not just image either. I mean, the senator was right. It brings everybody's bond ratings down. And you got to believe that Brooks Patterson is out there worried about what happens if Detroit goes under.
Right. And you know, we're in a mode in the state where we're talking about trying to get things going in the right direction, and Detroit is critical to that. The governor has said that over and over and over again, that there is no Michigan recovery without a Detroit recovery. And so the message he has to be sending to the rest of the state is, you can't let this happen either, that this is not just about folks down in southeast Michigan, that we will all suffer if this doesn't get worked out.
Real quick, most pivotal time in Detroit's history?
One of them, yes.
I
think this is a defining moment for the city.
All right.
We've been through this kind of stuff before. It's just now we're at this critical juncture where we could actually run out of money, and that's never really happened before. It was threatened, but this is for real.